Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, GL and Jerome and Belu. And was writing words down. It's like what was resonating with me as you were talking. I just feel so, it's like words like grounded and real and hope and community and networking, empowerment and passion. So I feel all of those, and I'm sure a lot of folks who are joining us for that last session um, are feeling at least some of those, if not all of those, along with me. So I just am so grateful for the work that you're doing and getting the opportunity to hear about it. So thank you for so I am, as Corey mentioned, my name is Leah Sepperly, and I am the Sustainability Planning and Evaluation Manager at the University of Dayton, and I've been a board member at CURC since 2021, and I serve on the Finance and Sponsorship Committee. And I'm really excited to introduce the next session, which is a presentation on partnerships for people and the planet. And I want to welcome Leanna Hauser, who is the Waste Reduction and Recycling Manager at Johns Hopkins University. Cara Murray, the Program Analyst at Baltimore City Department of Public Works, and Ava Richardson, the Director of Sustainability at Baltimore City Department of Planning. To welcome Liana. Liana works to engage all members of the Johns Hopkins community in reducing the generation of waste and encouraging the responsible reuse and recycling of materials. Her almost 20-year career at Hopkins started at the Center for a Livable Future, where she co-led the university's first greenhouse gas inventory. From there, she moved to the university's Office of Sustainability, then on to managing the main undergraduate campus's recycling office, and is now back at the Office of Sustainability, supporting waste reduction and diversion for the entire university. So welcome, Liana. Cara Murray has worked with the Baltimore Department of Public Works for a year, returning to the public sector after working as a professional services consultant in Washington, D.C. As a program analyst for the Public Works, Cara works on policy analysis, grant research and writing, public outreach and communication strategies to enhance the abilities of the Office of Waste Diversion. So welcome, Cara. And Ava Richardson has over a decade of experience leading public health initiatives, advocating for environmental policies, and managing programs designed to address social, racial inequities, and environmental justice. She previously served as the sustainability manager and a Food Matters technical advisor in the office, where she led the implementation of special projects, supported the Commission on Sustainability, and helped to pilot new sustainability programming, such as the farmers market-based food scrap collection pilot. During her time with the city, Ava also served as the recast project director at the Baltimore City Public Health Department, advancing efforts to address decades of trauma in West Baltimore. So I want to welcome Liana, Cara, and Ava.
Thanks, Leah. All right, I'm going to share, we are sharing slides. So let's see. Okay. All right. Happy to be here. Hello again from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm excited to share this stage with Ava and Cara and talk about our wonderful partnership that I think has bloomed into some friendship too, which is fantastic. But what we're doing together in Baltimore to really advance waste reduction, waste diversion, environmental justice issues for not just our individual organizations, but for Baltimore region as a whole. So we're each gonna sort of talk a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll talk about some of the partnerships that we've forged together. So if you're not already familiar with Hopkins, let me share a few high-level points about us to set the context for our place in Baltimore and our work in waste reduction and diversion. We are America's first research institution established in 1876, and we have been the nation's leader in federal research and development funding each year since 1979. So this greatly impacts our facilities, our community, and the amount and type of waste we generate at our 7 campuses, which are spread out across Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and their metropolitan areas. As you can see, we have 14.5 million plus square feet of real estate. So again, we occupy a lot of space, and within that space, we generate a lot of waste. And we have a student population of 30,000, which about 24,000 of those are graduate students. We have a very large graduate population, again, highly related to our research mission. We employ over 21,000 staff, and combined with the hospital, Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is actually a separate and separately governed entity, we make up the largest private employer in the state of Maryland. So again, lots of people, lots of space, lots of waste, lots of impact, but also lots of opportunity to engage with people within the Baltimore metropolitan region to who live in that space as well as work in that space. So that's exciting for us. The Office of Sustainability was established in 2008, making it a relatively old office. Not that we are ahead of the game with our peers, but we're hoping to kind of catch back up with some of our work. But we've been around for quite some time. We generate over 6,300 tons of waste annually with an average recycling rate of about 35%. As you can see from the graph, we've had some spikes thanks to a now unfortunately suspended animal bedding composting program. So animal bedding is really heavy, so that really helped us out. We're hoping to re-establish that. And of course, everybody knows about those pre-National Sword Days when they accepted just about everything. They didn't necessarily recycle it, but they took it. And so we got the credit for those weights. But now we are doing our best to really minimize what we can accept, so that we can be reassured that it is actually recycled. We have a mix of dual and single stream recycling at our 7 campuses, and 5 of them actually have a composting program. This is an incredibly exciting time to be at Hopkins because we expect to adopt a new sustainability plan next year that will codify commitments for waste reduction and diversion through 2030, which we are calling responsible consumption. So I'm thrilled to be here today, as I mentioned, to talk to you about the road Ava, Kara, and I have traveled to build the exciting and productive partnership between Johns Hopkins University and Baltimore City Offices of Sustainability and Public Works. So I'm going to turn it over to Ava.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for kind of teeing us up here, Leanna. I just want to stress the point that was made about the partnerships and how so much of the progress we have made so far has been reliant on strong partnerships and relationships, not just with our major institutions across the city, but with our university partners, and also community members and community organizations, grassroots organizations. Because when we think about all the many changes that have to be made on the ground, in restaurants, in homes, we know that our biggest partner and constituency in these changes are the 580,000 plus residents across the city of Baltimore. And so working with a broad array of stakeholders to make progress on this work cannot be overstressed in terms of its importance and relevance to progress. So the Baltimore Office of Sustainability was created in 2007, right around the time that Hopkins Office of Sustainability was created, actually. And so in that time, the work and scope of the office has grown and expanded. So currently we support community-based food waste programs in partnership with our Department of Public Works, including the Baltimore Food Matters program, which was started in our office and now has been transitioned and institutionalized within the Department of Public Works, as well as the farmers market based food scrap collection programs and some community composting efforts. Other food waste reduction efforts include supporting the city's food waste reduction working group, which was meeting on a quarterly basis for quite some time. We worked with the Maryland Food Bank to hire a food sourcer that supported food rescue efforts across the city where uneaten food was ensured. We ensured that uneaten food could be diverted to communities to be consumed And we've piloted other kind of like smaller projects and initiatives and explored other ways to advance food waste reduction across the city, such as looking at the utility of different applications that help to facilitate connecting donors to organizations such as community gardens or urban farms, getting food to food pantries. In our office, we cover a broad scope of different programs and initiatives. Much of our work is led by our 2019 sustainability plan, which includes 23 chapters, hundreds of strategies, and over 70 metrics to track our progress in urban sustainability across the city. Some of the other work that we lead includes climate and resilience activities across the city, including the city's climate action plan. We are in the midst of updating our climate action plan right now for the city. If you are a city resident, it's really great to be involved and engaged in that process. And I'll drop a link to that website in case anyone's interested in learning more on how you can get involved. We're also going to be updating the city's disaster preparedness plan. And we manage that plan, which is a hazard mitigation plan for the city that allows Baltimore to be eligible for certain hazard mitigation funds for FEMA in community resiliency hubs across the city, in addition to other efforts that connect children to nature, policy implementation of such policies and initiatives as the city's plastic bag ban, the foam ban, or pesticide regulations. And we engage in various regulatory efforts across the city related to floodplain management and forest conservation. So aside from some of the work that's happening here that we do all across the office, I just want to provide a little bit more background on the city's partnership with the Natural Resources Defense Council and how that was critical to building up much of this work across the cities. About 2 years ago in 2018, the city engaged in a partnership with NRDC and was provided more than $500,000 over the course of 2 to 3 years in grant funding to hire a Food Matters technical advisor, support small grants that encouraged or enhanced food rescue or food waste reduction efforts amongst community organizations. We also received quite a bit of technical assistance and advice and expertise from NRDC during that time period, and that included an assessment of the city's food rescue or food donation landscape, in addition to an assessment of the capacity to recycle food scraps through either composting, anaerobic digestion, or other methods and approaches. We also engaged in a rather robust community, and if we can go to the next slide, please, a robust, I'll pass it to Kara for her to continue it on, but we engage in some robust communications and education efforts as well as it related to food waste across the city and how that connects to other issues. So.
Thanks, Ava. I'll do a little bit of an introduction to Baltimore City Public Works. I work for the Office of Waste Diversion. It was recently named that in January of this year, previously kind of Office of Special Services, but made the split between administration and waste diversion to put a focus on initiatives that are related to waste diversion. And includes getting a new chief, what we're calling a zero waste manager, who's set to start next week. So we're very excited about having that leadership within our small office. There's also a lot of guidance that kind of guides our office in the Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan, which was released in 2020. It was an effort to assess our waste stream and look at recommendations for reducing waste. And some of the recommendations that came out of it include expanding recycling to multiple family and commercial properties, expanding our recycling drop-offs, introducing compost infrastructure, and expanding recycling infrastructure. So within those recommendations, some of our biggest gains, or I guess lowest hanging fruit in terms of reducing waste, is diverting organic material out of our waste stream. There's also HB 264, a state bill that goes into effect January 1st of next year. So it's requires producers of 2,000 pounds of organic waste a week to divert that material from a landfill. We're putting in the effort to try and connect with MDE and their outreach plans to make sure that producers in the city of Baltimore are at least aware of their required, of their needs to meet the requirement to divert. There's also a lot of collaboration that went into our response to the EPA infrastructure bill. We put together responses to the RFIs, the requests for information regarding solid waste infrastructure and recycling outreach. And we do intend to apply for funding once it's released to focus on our solid waste infrastructure improvements. And finally, we have compost workshops and grow centers that are a collaboration between two different parts of DPW. There's our water and wastewater team, and we're over in solid waste. There's a lot of folks that work for DPW, but we work together to host compost workshops for backyard composters across the city. And many of them are in conjunction with the grow centers that provide resources for folks that want to connect with a master gardener to learn more about gardening. Free trees and mulch are available, and a lot of opportunities to connect with the liaisons from our respective offices in DPW. I'll pass it back.
Thanks, Kara. Sorry for shifting that slide on you. As you can tell from everybody's introductions, there's been a lot of cross collaboration, not only just between higher education institutions and government agencies, but within the government agencies and with the nonprofits that have kind of helped fund some of the work and grant funding. So my partnership with Baltimore City began with Baltimore City Public Schools. I just want to kind of like add this into the conversation, even though it wasn't with Kara and Ava, but just sort of, you know, planting the seed for other folks who may have opportunities to engage with other agencies in their cities and towns. But I started supporting their recycling programs through the donation of waste bins that we no longer needed after our campus, our campus waste bin standards were put in place. And so we removed all of our old bins and of course didn't want to throw them away. And so we donated hundreds of bins to Baltimore City Public School System. And since then have donated more bins and furniture from all of our surplus furniture program, valuing over $50,000. And so they've benefited greatly from all of that to expand and improve their waste and recycling programs. Then in 2016, I was invited to participate in the Baltimore Office of Sustainability's composting strategy meeting back in September of that year. This meeting was actually coordinated thanks to another wonderful lasting partnership between Baltimore Office of Sustainability and the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Again, a nonprofit partner that we continue to work with today that just keeps the partnerships going. From that meeting, I became part of the Creating Scalable Composting Infrastructure program to support large food waste generators working group. That's a mouthful. At that time, Hopkins was one of the few large anchor institutions with a composting program in the city. And so we had initiated back of the house composting pilot program in 2010 and had since grown it to all of our spaces on our main undergraduate campus and our 4 other campuses in Baltimore. So as part of that working group, I contributed strategies for scaling up composting for larger institutions like those of higher ed and other anchor institutions in Baltimore City. So that included a case study from the Baltimore Food Waste and Recovery Strategy. And this document would ultimately help Baltimore receive the NRDC Food Matters funding that Ava referenced and created that program and the fellowship position, which brought Ava to Baltimore, or at least to Baltimore City office, and into my life and paved the road for establishing, enhancing, and expanding a zero waste future for Baltimore with a particular emphasis on food waste reduction, recovery, and composting. Before that actual work kicked off, though, I was invited to join a 2018 Mayor's Clean City Committee, where I represented institutions of higher education. I didn't meet Kara there, but I did work closely with her former colleague to make recommendations on how to scale up partnerships between higher education as well as other anchor institutions in the city and the Baltimore City Department of Public Works, so that we could all further expand and improve recycling and composting, as well as capturing key data from these institutions to better understand the full waste diversion picture in Baltimore. So that's my engagement beginnings with the Baltimore City Offices of Sustainability and Public Works. So let's take us over to 2019, when my good friend Ava came onto the scene.
All right. Thank you so much. And yeah, just again, stressing though how important those relationships have been. Our team that we developed, it was a little working group for the Food Matters project. We all really enjoyed working with each other, just enjoyed getting together and being able to kind of like nerd out on food waste, especially because not as many people were talking about it at that time. And it was something where we were kind of like building what that looks like or what it could look like for the city. And a lot of that work started before I even got to the office, but we were able to do an Eds and Meds convening in 2019. This was another one of kind of like the initiatives or efforts that we had started during that 2-year deep dive that we did with NRDC. The importance of bringing together these institutions was really to get buy-in from universities, hospitals, and other large food waste producers across the city. Because we know when those changes are made at the institutional level, we can really see some rather significant diversion rates and goals. Now that HB 264, the Organic Waste Residuals Bill, or the Organic Waste Diversion Bill, has been passed, and Kara will talk more about that. But I think that initial engagement was so important to kind of get organizations thinking about food waste reduction beyond composting or beyond the kind of the lower end of the food waste hierarchy, thinking about what can be done, as Leanna mentioned, in the back of the house to prevent the waste from ever happening, how planning and tracking plays into that. And then also for universities, especially if there's a dining hall or a large food production facility on campus, what does it look like for changing students' behavior? What does that look like in terms of changing the expectation for how much food is put out in the cafeteria or food hall? What does that look like for how big the plates are? You know, and I think there's a culture around higher ed where you know, that's having that abundance of food is really the expectation, and the option of running out doesn't seem to be one that many people are willing to tolerate. But how do we change that expectation so that we're getting at the culture of waste and changing our day-to-day behaviors, and how we're as a society responding to or changing our expectations. So this particular convening was really coordinated to get some commitments from universities and hospitals in terms of their food waste reduction goals, but also to, again, provide that education and background and disseminate and distribute educational materials to post around their campuses, and to ensure that we knew who some of those key contacts were within each of those institutions. This was because this happened in 2019, and at the time we had met with a couple of universities across the city to get a better sense of what could be done in their cafeterias and how the city could help with some of these food waste goals. For one university, we had planned to do like a food waste reduction or food waste weighing day to weigh whatever plate waste ended up getting thrown out after students were finished with the meal. Because this was 2019 and at the beginning of 2020, COVID happened, we really weren't able to continue to engage at the level that we would have liked. In so many educational institutions, colleges and universities, their attendance had changed, going virtual. So some of the kind of like aspirational ideas that we had didn't come to pass at that time. But I think now that HB 264 is going to go into effect in January, it's a really good time to be re-engaging institutions across the city. And one of the mechanisms that we set up to engage institutions was, again, the Baltimore Food Waste Reduction Working Group, which was meeting monthly initially, and we framed the meetings around different levels of the food waste recovery hierarchy. So some meetings initially would have been focused on prevention, others could have been focused, then the next one could have been focused on food rescue, and then we had a meeting focused on food scrap recycling. This was also something that had to be adjusted or changed after COVID happened, in terms of how we were able to engage partners as time went on. The working group focused more on the large institutions, but at one point we had some more like grassroots or private industries involved as well that were really helping to contribute to a very broad perspective on food waste, looking at it from every perspective possible. So from there, I'll go ahead and pass it to Kara for her to provide some more detailed updates on what DPW is doing now to continue the program.
Yeah, so one of the biggest activities this past summer with the Food Waste Reduction Working Group members that included those higher ed, Johns Hopkins, UMB, and Loyola, got them involved with interest in developing and expanding a program using funds from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So they have a community food waste reduction and composting grant that's available. And we are excited about the opportunity to expand some of our offerings that DPW is able to support with the help of some of these higher ed partners. So we proposed to open up new food scrap drop-off locations, at least one at each of these sites, and at a couple sites. So at UMB, there aren't any food scrap drop-offs now, and so the proposal is to add 2 locations for students and the community to have access to a food scrap drop-off site at least once a week. So in contrast, our current food scrap drop-off sites are at our citizens convenience centers. We have 5, and they're open all the days that those convenience centers are open, and folks can likely have to drive there to drop off their food scraps, which are collected by compost crew and taken down to Prince George's County for composting at their large-scale composting facility. So we wanted to create a little bit more access to those higher ed campuses and the communities surrounding them to food scrap drop-off sites, which is why we propose to have some new options on these campuses. We also wanted to develop a take-home composting guide. And so we worked with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance to get them involved in the proposal to see what it would take to get a comprehensive guide that we can use in promoting composting in Baltimore City. We also built in support for local food rescue organizations. So this includes $10,000 in sub-grant funds to 2 food rescue organizations within the city, as well as more support for our home composting workshops, which I mentioned that we do in collaboration with our water and wastewater side of DPW, and intend to continue on as part of the Food Matters program. We'll continue on now that that program is over in hosting fall composting workshops and spring/summer composting workshops. We can do about 10 a year, and also give away free composting bins for backyard composters that attend those. And we're excited about the results of this. We're anticipating really good news coming out of this, and look forward to hopefully implementing all of these awesome elements in the next couple of years.
Thank you both. I will open up for questions, and there's our contact information if anybody wants to reach out.
See, we don't have, well, one question just popped up into the chat. Does Baltimore have organics collection service?
The city does not provide curbside organics collection service. We do offer leaf pickup, but we don't do organics collection for curbside.
And I'll just add that that is why we do have the food scrap drop-off services across the city. So the sites that Kara mentioned, as well as 2 farmers markets where people can drop off their food scraps. So we don't have that service yet, but we do have other options for residents to drop off their food waste.
And so just a reminder to folks, you can either raise your hand, virtual hand, or put your question into the chat. We have a few minutes before we move to the next presentation. And if we don't get to them all today, then or live, then we'll have the presenters answer them in the chat kind of over the next few minutes and early in the next presentation. So we did another question. How many people are working in the this question was already addressed in the chat, but I'll ask it again. How many people work in the Baltimore Office of Sustainability, and was staffing addressed in the plan?
That's an excellent question. So right now we have 6 full-time staff members with 2 vacancies. Once those are filled, we'll have 8 full-time staff members, including we have kind of like a rotation of interns and typically 1 or 2 contract positions, depending on whether or not we're supporting a grant. So we are actually recruiting right now for a climate and resilience manager, and I'll drop a link to that position in the chat. Please feel free to share that role amongst your networks. That was not addressed in the plan explicitly. However, it is something that we think about a lot in terms of our strategic planning for the office internally. So we talk a lot about increasing capacity and expanding the office and what it looks like to ensure that we have the right types of expertise in the office, because we're covering a range of issues from transportation to waste to circular economy and water, stormwater runoff, and many other topics. And so I'm ensuring that we have a broad scope of expertise in the office is something that we consider and think about a lot.
Thanks. And a couple more questions are coming in. Do you know the residential participation rate in the food drop-off program?
So we don't know a rate since we don't keep track of like addresses that would come to drop off at the food scrap drop-off sites. But I do know how much weight we've collected at the city's convenience centers, and it's been just over a year. So the collection started in August of 2021, and it's continuing on now in perpetuity. And so far we've collected about 80,000 pounds of food scrap material through that program.
And are there any type of green workforce development programs in the works to support the sustainability plan?
So right now, we don't manage sustainability work or workforce programs focused on kind of like building those sustainable careers directly in the office. That is supported by Civic Works. They have a Center for Sustainable Careers, and I'll also drop a link to that in the chat. But they're training folks on various skills, including solar installation, brownfields training, energy retrofitting, and other skills to ensure that there is a competent workforce that's able to support with both the clean energy transition to more energy efficiency, and providing other fundamental skills such as CDL licenses and how to manage toxic waste and other things, because we know when it comes to so many of the skills or the expertise, again, needed to address the climate change issues that we're facing as a city, having that competent workforce is so important. But I'll drop a link in the chat to the Center for Sustainable Careers that's supported by Civic Works.
Well, thank you. At this point, I'm going to give us a quick minute for a bathroom break and thank our presenters, Leanna, Kara, and Ava. Thank you so much for the presentation. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.